What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Rotoworld Basketball Show. I'm Dan Titus, joined with Noah Rubin and Raphielle Johnson. We got things to talk about today. LeBron making more history. We lose Kyrie Irving for the rest of the season. Going to talk about that and some headlines, as well as, hey, man, fantasy playoffs have either started or they're right around the corner, so we definitely have to get prepared for that, as well as the trade deadline if you're playing in Yahoo League. So let's get right to it, man. Let's talk about LeBron James surpassing 50,000 regular season and postseason points. That is the most in NBA history by like 6K over Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Raph, do you think that this is going to be one of those unbreakable records, like a Jerry Rice receiving record or Michael Phelps getting, 23 Olympic gold medals? Like, is this one of those untouchable things just based off what we've seen in the longevity of LeBron's career and the production at such a high clip at this point of his career?
Yeah, I think so. There's so many factors. It's been long reported he'll spend at least 7 figures annually on personal upkeep, just to make sure he's in shape to play as much as he does. And then we're in an era through, I don't care whose fault it is, but injury management's a real thing. I think LeBron started his career when that wasn't the case, and he kind of just powered on throughout these 22 years. So I think the longevity and also, the availability are why this record, not to mention its excellence, why this record is probably not going to be broken.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about one of the best scorers in NBA history. I mean, you could say that he is because he has the most points, but it's the combination of everything you mentioned. It's the fact that at 18 years old, he was mature enough to, I guess, start investing in his body early on. And that's why he's spent more than half of his life in the NBA. And then if you also compare the numbers of him as a rookie versus, each stint that he's had with different teams, it's like the numbers are all comparable. It's not going to be replicated until there's massive breakthroughs in science that allow players to, potentially still play at a high level until they're like 50. But I mean, that's probably going to be the only chance that anybody has.
Yeah, it's going to be so tough. And what's also tough is now Luka's finally, I mean, we talked about last week, he was struggling from the field, shooting 38% as a Laker, but found his groove last night, 30 points, 15 assists, first LA Laker in history to put up those type of numbers.
All right.
No.
Fourth.
Yeah. Fourth player. Yeah. Gotta say there's probably a Kobe, Elgin Baylor. Who's the other person?
The other three are
LeBron. Yeah.
Jerry West, LeBron, and Magic Johnson. And Magic did it 22 times.
Yeesh.
So
that's crazy. So fourth player to drop 30 and 15 in a game. Now that we've got to see this combo together post All-Star break, the Lakers are 6-0. What have they met your expectations, exceeding it, Noah? Where are you with this LeBron Luka combo?
I think to this point they've exceeded it. I didn't expect them to, I guess, kind of figure things out this quickly. But it seems like, I don't know, everything is just working very smoothly. And I think that's honestly, you have to give a lot of the credit to both of them as basketball players, the entire team, but JJ Redick doing that and having everything work out in his first year as a head coach. I know that there was a lot of, I guess, questions about why he got the head coaching job initially. People are like, oh, LeBron just wants his podcast partner in there so that he can basically run the team. But I think JJ Redick going from podcaster to coach of the year candidate is inspiring for all of us. Are one of us going to make the jump next year? I don't know.
We'll see. Greatness.
Yeah, I mean, I he paved the way, man. We should all be candidates, but it's very impressive to see them figure this out as a team this quickly.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think for me, the concern wasn't so much Luka and LeBron, just because combination of talent and basketball IQ is so high that you figure they'd eventually figure some things out. I think it's the other guys you kind of worry about. Austin Reeves had been playing well before his injury. Jackson Hayes didn't miss a shot last night, 19 points, 10 rebounds. He's done his job, and them kind of manufacturing these lineups without a reputable center, it has been really impressive for this team, especially defensively. I think getting Jared Vanderbilt back has really helped in that regard, but seeing Dalton Connect play with more confidence since his return. Those first few games were a struggle. Now he looks a lot better. So I think they've exceeded expectations to now we're talking about them as like a serious threat in the Western Conference to Oklahoma City.
Yeah, I think it's definitely speaks to them locking in on defense. They've been a top 5 team, maybe top 3, nope, top 5 for the last since post All-Star break in defensive rating. And what you're getting from LeBron on the defensive end, and even Luka, considering how small they are, I think is pretty impressive. So the versatility, I think you can't understate. Jared Vanderbilt coming back and actually being able to play now. This team's going to be scary. I mean, I think they could certainly make it interesting in the Western Conference, them and the Warriors, but I think they're still chasing the Oklahoma City Thunder. But either way, at least this is really good basketball that we're getting at this stage in the NBA, where most people are usually tuning out because it's not the playoffs yet. But like regular season basketball has definitely been very entertaining over the last several weeks. And unfortunately for Dallas Mavericks fans, as if they needed anything else to go bad and wrong this season, they lost Kyrie Irving to a torn ACL on Monday. Also, PJ Washington's dealing with an ankle injury. At what point do you think that the Mavs are starting to consider shutting Anthony Davis down? Like, there's already rumors and speculation from it. I wouldn't be surprised if they were already talking about it, whether, you know, the Dallas Mavericks made this late season run anyway because they're already fighting for a playing spot. But Raph, do you think we'll see Anthony Davis again this season?
I'm going to say no. Look, there's still a couple games ahead of Phoenix in the loss column in the West for that final play-in spot, but they have control of their first-round pick. I don't know how deep this draft class is going to go in terms of value, but it's really good overall in terms of how people have spoken about it. They have a decision to make with Kyrie. You know, he can opt out of his contract this summer, and now, unfortunately, you know, through nobody's fault, the equation kind of changes with the knee injury because you don't know when he'll be back at some point next season. So I think for that reason, you know, Daniel Gafford, Derek Lively still out. They're looking at extended absences. I don't think we're going to see AD again this year, personally.
Yeah, I agree. I'm fully expecting him to, you know, be shut down. I don't know when the official announcement will come out. I think the report that his camp is kind of discussing it. I think it was Shams Charania that reported that. I think that was just kind of soft launching the idea of, hey, like, don't expect him to play again this season. There's no reason for him to. Like, if you sneak into that last play-in spot and then bring AD back, do you even make it out of the play-in tournament? Or if you do you really like your chances of beating the Thunder? Like, it would be almost a waste of time for them to do that. And it is a very talented class. I haven't done my like full in-depth scouting yet, but there's a lot of players that I see projected to go in the mid to late first round that I really have liked this season in the scouting that I've done. So I think it makes sense to try and draft as early as possible. So yeah, I'd be pretty shocked if we saw AD again this season.
Yeah, at least from a fantasy perspective, I don't think you can count on him to play within the next 2 or 3 weeks. I think we're going to see how the Dallas Mavericks continue. If they can win games and maybe they get into the play-in tournament, maybe we see him, you know, make some miraculous recovery. But I think from a fantasy perspective, we can pretty much count on him not being available with just so many injuries hampering the Dallas Mavericks. And it just sucks for Kyrie Irving, a guy that was performing at first-round value, you know, on the cusp of 50, 40, 90, yet again playing the most minutes over the last month than any player in the NBA. So it just kind of sucks to see that value go away. Thanks, Noah, for wearing a Sixers hat to remind me that they still exist and play basketball. Unfortunately, Joel Embiid is going to be missing the rest of the season with a knee injury. No surprise there. But Noah, what concern do you have for Paul George and Tyrese Maxey the rest of the season? We touched on it last week as, you know, Maxey could potentially shut it down if the Sixers decide to tank. But I think it's more of a question now after suffering a back injury that kept him out, leaving the game on Monday. He missed last game. It wasn't back-to-back, so I wasn't surprised that he missed it. But I think there's genuine concern about the Sixers and their players going forward. What do you think?
Yeah, I wore the hat to let you know that I stand with you and I, like, you know, support you despite everything that your team is doing.
It's a safe space. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, of course. I just wanted you to feel supported. I know your team doesn't make you feel that way, so I wanted to be here for you. But yeah, I mean, Paul George has been very disappointing this season, a number of different injuries. The report after their game last night was Nick Nurse saying that, like, they are concerned about Paul George's groin injury. Tyrese Maxey, the finger issue, the back issue, like those injuries as they are, plus Embiid being done for the season, like they should just go ahead and shut things down. Like I frankly, like even if I would like to have those guys available for fantasy, it makes more sense for them as a team to just say, hey, you guys are done for the year. We really need to make sure that we are getting our top 6 pick and that we're not giving the Thunder another guy, potentially like a top 10 pick. And like we're adding that talent, because genuinely like a starting 5 of somebody drafted in the top 6 to go with Maxey, Jared McCain, Paul George, and Joel Embiid. Like if that's a healthy lineup, like that's pretty dangerous. And they also would have something to build around between Maxey, McCain, and whoever they were drafting in the top 6. So from a team perspective, it just makes sense to not play those guys. So there's going to be extra minutes for some of the players we've seen play well recently. Quentin Grimes, I think, is, number 1, like as far as like targets that I don't even know if he's that available. I think he was rostered in close to 40% of Yahoo leagues when I looked yesterday, but Andre Drummond, Gershon Yabusele, and then I'm sure as the season progresses, we're going to find more and more names just to stream in for a couple games at a time.
Yeah, it's over, man. Like it's just at least for this season, it's over. Like let's be completely honest about this.
Been over, but yeah.
For so long we heard the talk about, well, if they get healthy, they can throw a scare into someone. Like, look, man, we've all watched Cleveland and Boston this season. They may get a gentleman's sweep. That's the most that Philly would get if they were healthy, given how they were playing before the injuries. At this point, you've got your top 6 protected first-round pick. They need to do everything in their power to make sure they protect that pick and don't give it to Oklahoma City, because you're paying a lot of money for Maxey, George, and Embiid in terms of contracts. You're going to need low-cost but productive players to fill out that roster. Why not get a high lottery pick on a rookie deal for the next 3 to 4 years to help with that? So, yeah, I think they absolutely have to pull the plug. In terms of the names to target, Noah pretty much hit on all of them. Maybe Justin Edwards gets into the mix. I know he's been injured recently, but down the line, maybe he gets into the mix as well in the back end of like fantasy playoffs. But I think he covered everyone pretty much.
Yeah, as an aside, since you were just throwing a couple subliminals there, Raph, how are you feeling about your Knicks, man? Karl-Anthony Towns is away from the team. That's pretty significant for the Knicks and the way they've been playing as of late, man. Like,
it seems,
and then from a fantasy perspective, how do you think that works out?
It seems like a pretty serious situation based on what his girlfriend tweeted, late last night. So not going to make light of that, obviously. But Mitchell Robinson started on Tuesday, but he's still under a restriction. Tom Thibodeau said it wasn't a restriction, more like a guideline. But if you're only playing 15 minutes, I think that qualifies as a restriction. Precious Achiuwa, while he can be a sieve defensively, he's playing 30 minutes. You kind of have to roster him in deep leagues right now. He grabbed 15 rebounds last night, so you can get some production there. I don't think Josh Hart's going to play as poorly as he did last night. So, but he's already rostered in most leagues. But I think Precious Achiuwa, maybe Deuce McBride in terms of additional offense. Those are the guys that kind of target right now in New York.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And yeah, hope everything's all right with Kat. I mean, that's just pretty unexpected news. Obviously it's for personal reasons. So you never know when those timelines can kind of be figured out, especially as we're approaching the fantasy playoffs. Fantasy managers definitely need to pivot. So I think in the short term, Precious Achiuwa is certainly someone that could help in the rebounding department. Maybe even get you a low-end double-double, depending on how he's shooting. Did not shoot the ball particularly well last night. But the Orlando Magic also lost Jalen Suggs to a knee injury. I think if you're talking about, I don't know, obviously he's not going to be he was in the conversation for most improved player, but I'd actually argue that he's been pretty valuable for the Orlando Magic. Like ever since he's been out of the lineup, this team has just been going completely the wrong direction. And he's almost like he's the guy that maybe he's the leader in the room. Like he leads them defensively. He kind of gets them up. Like obviously you have Franz and Paolo leading the offense, but I don't know. It just seems like something that like their soul has just not been there since he's been out of the lineup. So unfortunately, that means that, Cole-Anthony is probably going to be a rosterable guy for the rest of the way. So, Noah, is that something that you trust the rest of the season? Obviously, he's going to have his ups and downs as a scorer, but he has been productive in fantasy, especially in points leagues when he's given the opportunity.
Yeah, I don't think he's a must roster player. I think that is going to be it is a good opportunity for him. And he will have some games where you're like, dang, I wish I would have streamed him in. But I think just overall, I'm not super excited about it. He has been starting the past, I guess, month.
Mhm.
And the results have been pretty mixed. Like you said, like a better in points leagues, the shooting percentage is bad. A couple really good games, couple absolute duds in there. I just don't really trust any of the point guard options in Orlando right now. I'd rather turn to just other general streaming options. I don't think that the production at his best from Cole-Anthony is going to be a player that I'm like, I just need to have this guy in my rotation or in my on my fantasy team. The other options of Anthony Black and Corey Joseph, like, not super excited about it. It was pretty surprising that with Cole-Anthony out last night, Corey Joseph started and Anthony Black played like 15 minutes off the bench. That was eye-opening, a little bit discouraging for me for my just overall valuation of Anthony Black. So hopefully, I mean, I really liked him when he was drafted, so hopefully he's able to continue to develop as a player. But right now, I'm just kind of steering clear of Orlando.
Yeah, I think if anything, you're using that spot maybe to stream various options from different teams. I think you can find some young guards on another team who's probably going to play extended minutes down the stretch here. That for me, I agree with Noah. Like, for every game that Cole-Anthony has that you think, hey, this is pretty good, he's probably going to have at least one or two where you're like, I don't want this man on my roster. So it's like, I'd rather use that as a streaming spot, and target a player on another team who's probably going to play more minutes down the stretch.
Yeah, that's a wise recommendation. I don't, outside of Paolo and Franz, it's pretty hard to trust. And Wendell Carter Jr., I guess it's kind of hard to trust anybody else from a fantasy perspective. And I don't really love Wendell Carter Jr. either, but he's just there by de facto.
Right.
Unfortunately, the Memphis Grizzlies lost Jaren Jackson Jr. It looks like a grade 2 ankle sprain, week-to-week injury, which just sucks for him and fantasy managers, more so for him because he's played 59 games this year. He's only 6 games away from qualifying for Defensive Player of the Year, All NBA defensive team. So part of me thinks that with that threshold in mind, he might try to push it back by at some point over the next couple of weeks here. But from a fantasy perspective, I mean, we're a week away from the playoffs. Playoffs will start in some leagues. Raph, do you prefer Brandon Clark or Santi Aldama? Probably Aldama, but he's more widely rostered, right?
Yeah, that's a pretty easy choice between those two. I think the question, I know Zach Edey's still rostered in a decent percentage of leagues. I don't think I would be targeting him, but I kind of feel like this is a situation where Aldama is the guy you want to go after. I don't know, Clark just doesn't seem to do it for me in terms of the production, when he's on the floor. Not much of a scorer. I'm trying to pull up his defensive numbers right now.
The stats are decent.
0.8 steals, 0.5 blocks. I guess there's potential there, but yeah, I think I would prefer Aldama. And then, I don't know about Edey. He's at 68% rostered, so I guess you can go there. He'll probably be back in the starting lineup, but I would prefer Aldama over any of those guys right now.
Yeah, I think Aldama will be the guy that benefits the most from Jaren Jackson out. The only thing with Memphis is that they're not the most frustrating rotation in the league, but they're definitely up there. Yeah. It's been, inconsistent, a lot of changes, and then also a lot of the guys that we expect to play starter level minutes, like that just hasn't been the case most of the season. It's like John Moran, Desmond Bane, and Jaren Jackson haven't been playing the consistent 36 minutes per game or anywhere close to that. So it's like, who is going to step up? That could change game to game. I mean, Luke Kennard has had some good games recently. I also like Gigi Jackson and Vince Williams Jr., but I don't necessarily trust that they're going to get enough minutes consistently to be worth picking up at this point. Maybe kind of a risky option in a deeper league, but it's kind of hard to trust truly anybody as a replacement for Jaren Jackson outside of Santi Aldama.
Yeah, even Scottie Pippen Jr., you would think that when Morant out, he would be the biggest beneficiary because early in the season he was absolutely cooking, but his minutes aren't he's not getting over 30 minutes consistently, right? So this is it's interesting because I think more people need to talk about the job Taylor Jenkins has done to despite all the injuries, still have Memphis as such a top seed in the Western Conference. But these rotations are crazy. So, yeah, I think if you need a fill-in big, if Brandon Clark is out there, Precious Achiuwa, maybe those are a couple options because you're not going to get much better in deeper leagues right now. But yeah, Santi Aldama definitely is going to be in for a big end of the season run here for the Memphis Grizzlies. Speaking about big men that got hurt, Domantas Sabonis is going to be reevaluated in a week. It's probably been about half that now. Jonas Valanciunas is putting up some good numbers for fantasy managers. But no, if you missed out on Valanciunas, is there any other Sacramento Kings player that you think will benefit from it? Is this maybe Keegan Murray's time to shine for a change? Like, it's looking good so far.
Yeah, I'm not super optimistic about Keegan Murray, even if it has been a little better. He's just not a player that I'm super excited about in fantasy. I think, honestly, outside of Valanciunas, the main guy that's going to benefit is Malik Monk. He was already kind of one of the best assist guys on the team, even when De'Aaron Fox was there. And now you're taking Fox and Sabonis out of the equation. I believe he had 8 assists the other night in 23 minutes when they played and they blew Dallas out. Trey Lyles also played well in that game, but it was a blowout. So it's like, is his spot in the rotation going to be that consistent to the point where he's worth rostering? I think he's probably the only other player that you could consider for that spot, but I'm not sure that his minutes will be consistent enough for that to really be worth adding in a standard league. So I'm not really seeing too much else outside of Valanciunas that I feel really good about.
What about Keon Ellis?
I mean,
the minutes.
Hopefully, the minutes, and he should be, in my opinion, starting. But
yeah, I think in the immediate future, because Malik Monk is out tonight as well with a toe injury.
Right.
So you're talking about a guy who's just outside the top 124 minutes per game since the All-Star break, according to Basketball Monster. And I think those minutes are going to spike up here, especially if Monk has to miss multiple games. So 21% rostered. I would have Keon Ellis on my radar because, let's be honest, a lot of people likely did miss out on Valanciunas just because of how high his percentage was while in Washington. So I think Keon Ellis probably be as far as I'd be willing to go in Sacramento at this point.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a good option. Their playoff schedule also looks pretty good too. I'm trying to pull it up for a second here. So yeah, Sacramento is one of 6 teams to play 12 games over weeks 20 to 22, which is the Yahoo default playoff. So that's definitely a team you'll want to have roster just for that 4-4-4 schedule. So yeah, Keon Ellis, I mean, we'll see how long Malik Monk is out, but yeah, I think he's the one that's widely available that you can actually do something actionable with. Real quick, just want to talk some buy and sell real quick. It's tough loss for the Clippers. But I can't help but notice like how menacing Kris Dunn has been lately. The only problem is he just can't hit a wide open jump shot. Like, it's crazy how much teams are sagging off of him. But he's been a top 50 player in 9-cat over the last 2 weeks. Noah, are you buying or selling Kris Dunn the rest of the season? And obviously, it's considering that Norman Powell has not been available as much lately.
I'm selling. I think he plays a very valuable role for them as a defensive player. Like, he is important to them as a team. And the steals can look really good at times, but the lack of contributions in other categories kind of scares me away. Honestly, it's not quite a perfect comparison, but it's the same issue that I have with the way Keon Ellis is being used. It's just Kris Dunn is getting the opportunity that Keon Ellis isn't. But he just hasn't been able to do as much. Like Keon Ellis, when he gets enough minutes, the defensive stats are there, but he can also give you a bunch of threes or like contribute in other ways. Kris Dunn is basically just steals, but if he's not getting you the steals, then he's basically just out there getting cardio. And so that's just not a player that I really trust, especially like to consider him a top 50 player. I don't think that if you tried to trade him right now, you could get a top 100 player necessarily. So it's tough, but it is definitely inflated by the steals. So hopefully he can keep getting them consistently, but if it's not happening, then
I'm not buying top 50 or top 100, but I am buying that he will be a viable player for the rest of the season. And the reason why I say this, since the break, he's shooting about 47% from the field. So it hasn't been all like just throwing the ball at the basket and hoping that it goes in. He's had some good moments out there shooting the basketball. Obviously, last night was not good. 0 for 5 from 3, 1 for 6 overall against the Suns. But I think he can get you enough layups to keep that percentage at a respectable number. I think I'm going to buy Kris Dunn the rest of the season here in terms of being able to continue to provide tangible value. But top 50, that's a bit much, I think.
So I saw a very fair trade offered in Yahoo. Kris Dunn for Domantas Sabonis rest of the season. Who are you taking?
I think
I'd take Domantas.
Yeah, Sabonis.
Okay, all right. And he's outside the top 100, so I think that tracks to what Noah was referring to and not being able to get a top 100 player. But we'll see how Sabonis does. I mean, I love it when Vucevic is off the floor and Zach Collins is getting his moment, but we'll see how this continues to unfold as the race for the 10 spot continues between the Brooklyn Nets, the Chicago Bulls, and the Sixers. Sixers are winning something. We're winning something right now. This is good.
Let's go.
So I want to hit the rookie report real quick. Devin Vassell had a really good game, but I think we can pretty much all agree that Stephon Castle, whether he's coming off the bench or starting, has just been absolutely amazing for not only fantasy basketball, but for rookie of the year. He's running away with the award. But there's another person in Toronto that I think is going to potentially make some waves in the fantasy playoffs here, and that's Jacoby Walter. And Raph is already starting to charge. He's already putting in bids for this guy in the fantasy playoffs. So Raph, talk to me about Jacoby Walter and just his opportunity with the Toronto Raptors. Obviously a tanking team, but where do you see his opportunity size really being in fantasy right now?
Well, I think he's going to be starting for the foreseeable future. They lost Gradey Dick to the knee injury on Sunday. Walter started last night in Orlando. I think, did he hit the game winner, if I'm not mistaken?
He did.
Yeah, so, 17 points, 3 rebounds, 1 steal, 1 block, and 2 3-pointers. It's only 4 for 10 from the field, but he played 28 minutes, and I think his place in the rotation makes him someone who could be one of those silly season difference makers for fantasy managers just looking for availability at this point.
I think just going back to your previous point before, I'm happy to talk about Jacoby Walter. I'm pretty excited about the opportunity for him, but are we sure that Stephon Castle's the runaway favorite? Because this is the probably least talked about number one overall pick in as long as I can remember.
Long time.
Potentially going back to Anthony Bennett. Like, it's borderline disrespectful the amount of the lack of conversation around Zaccharie Risacher. This is a guy that I wasn't high. I didn't like the pick. Like, I'll admit that. But the numbers between Risacher and Stephon Castle are very comparable. And there's been times in the past, handful of years, where winning has actually mattered to rookie of the year. And Risacher's team is going to be in the postseason. Stephon Castle's team probably isn't. I just think that there might be a little bit of a Zaccharie Risacher case here.
Isn't this usually an award that goes to the highest scoring rookie, generally speaking, which would be
it is
Stephon Castle, but it's close. It's also break. It's close. It's close.
Yeah, it's over the season. It's 13.2 points for Castle to 11.6 for Risacher, but Risacher's been slightly more efficient, with his percentages, and sees less shots, less minutes. So, I don't know. I just think there needs to be a conversation here.
Both teams have 34 losses, though. Just said Atlanta's.
We're not worried about actual record.
No, hell no, man. But that's the thing. I kind of wonder if for some voters there's probably going to be an Eastern Conference tax, because let's be honest, that conference is far worse than the West. So
right.
Yeah.
And then you also factor in losing Victor Wembanyama, during the All-Star break. So I don't know if we're going to make the argument. True, I feel it. That's a good point. But if we're
I can make my petty arguments. Trust me.
If we're gonna make petty arguments about winning, maybe Jalen Wells should be given the award.
Yeah,
he's a starter on a winning team.
Yeah,
locking up the best offensive player every year, every game.
This
on him.
Like, this is a conversation where you have multiple players involved in the Rookie of the Year competition. Like, most years, they announce the 3 finalists. You pretty much know who's going to win it. I don't think that's going to be the case this time around. That doesn't mean this class is bad. It means that other guys have stepped up at various points throughout the season more than anything.
Yeah, I think it also just speaks to the fact that, the coverage around the NBA is so at the top tier of LeBron and the Dallas Mavericks shit show and all that type of stuff, where it's like, low key, the number one overall pick is playing pretty well at this stage of the season. So, and especially after all the trade movement of DeAndre Hunter leaving, and now it seems like Risacher is like the 3rd best player right now behind, obviously Trey, Okongwu, and then probably Risacher. So hopefully we see more conversation around his growth and development this season. Is he not? What the
Karis LeVert?
Dyson Daniels.
Dyson Daniels. Oh yeah.
True.
That was the one I was getting upset about.
True.
Yeah, he should win Defensive Player of the Year.
Yeah,
he should.
That
no matter what.
Too, but,
well, how about this whole conversation about how Cade's leading most improved player? And it's like, bro, he was
that's
like top of his class, number 1 pick. Like, come on, man. Like, wrong award. Just call it. We got to get the. We got to
call it the first overall pick. You can't be most improved, man. Like,
yeah.
You're supposed to be.
It should be just. It should be change it to breakout player of the year or something like that.
Yeah.
Because like, there's just so many players that have taken that next leap that we all expected Cade to make because he was highly touted.
Did what you're supposed to award. You're the number 1 overall pick and made
doing what you're supposed to award.
Year 4. Like, no disrespect, because Cade's been awesome this year, but that kind of takes away from the nature of the award. But
for sure.
Anyways, we don't have to, because I'll rant and try to get 3 Atlanta Hawks postseason awards here, but we can. I'll give my thoughts on Jacoby Walter. I really do think that, like, part of my issue with Toronto drafting him in the first place was that his skill set was almost a bit redundant to what Gradey Dick provided. Like, just main quality is as a shooter, and obviously you can never have too many shooters, but it's like, this is the guy they drafted in the first round. Like, where does he fit in year 1? And if he doesn't develop, like, what is that? Is like basically a wasted pick. He was a guy I really liked early in the draft process, and then he kind of slowly slid down my board, but still like him. I'm excited to see what he can do with the team. I mean, pretty intentionally tanking now. I don't know if you guys saw that at the end of the game. Jacoby Walter hit the game winner, but they also had like benched all of their starters really late in the game, which was, I don't know. That level of tanking is almost like, I'd rather you just rule everybody out at the beginning of the game than actually pull everybody out with 2 minutes left and be like, all right, yeah, we put up a good fight, guys. Like, let's just lose. But Jacoby Walter didn't care.
No. Hey, he's just taking his opportunities and, taking advantage of it. We'll say, if you do like the Toronto Raptors as a potential opportunity to tank down the rest of the season, if you have a bye week going into the playoffs starting next week in week 20, the Toronto Raptors do play 8 games over the final 2 weeks of the fantasy season. So if Gradey Dick is not ready, Scotty Barnes misses some games, Emmanuel quickly miraculously gets an injury, Jacoby Walter could be someone that does end up being a silly season, late season winner. Let's talk about some women's basketball for a second here, because the Big Ten women's basketball tournament is here. After a regular season filled with big drama and bigger upsets, the action shifts to Indianapolis. Catch tip-off of the first round today, beginning at 3:30 p.m. Eastern, only on Peacock. Going to be a good month of March, man, between the regular season NBA and March Madness kicking off with – this is going to be a really good rookie class, man. I can't wait till we can start talking about that. Very, very deep. But let's talk about how to handle the rest of this week here. In terms of pickups, I'll start with you, Raph. Who are a couple players or a few players that you're eyeing this week at the midway point that you think could help the rest of the week?
Yeah, I think you kind of have to start with Dallas. 3 games the remainder of this week. Max Christie and Najee Marshall are 2 guys on my radar as potential pickups for the rest of the week, because sadly, I don't really know where else they're going to be able to turn at this point because of all the injuries. So those are 2 guys. Spencer Dinwiddie. You guys know how I felt about his fantasy bona fides for quite some time now, but the opportunity is there for him, to provide that value. We'll see if he can do it. Portland's got 3 games this week too, so there's still room on the Toumani Camara bandwagon. Feel free to join me. So,
also for the defensive player of the year conversation,
he needs to
not
be
even
all
on the
defensive
list.
team. Sure.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens. He needs to be on one of those 2 teams.
Facts, big facts. Noah, where are you at with picking up players this week?
I think the Dallas guys are definitely the priority. I think with the Clippers, with Norm Powell being out, Bogdan Bogdanovic isn't widely available. But if he was dropped in your league because he's been pretty bad for most of the season, I think he's actually the guy that's going to kind of benefit the most from Powell being out of the lineup. And then we have to look at Utah. They have 3 more games this week. And let me tell you who's going to play based on who they play. They play Washington, Toronto, and Philadelphia. So they're not going to play any of their veterans. Those are not games that are safe for Lauri Markkanen, Walker Kessler, John Collins, etc. So we're going to see a lot of Kyle Filipowski, Bryce Sensabaugh. KJ Martin and Johnny Juzang will start, but like not as appealing as like a Sensabaugh and Kyle Filipowski. We'll still see Collier. I believe Keontae George is questionable tonight, but we're not like. I'd be very surprised if any of their more veteran players played at all this week. Whereas next week they start the week off with Boston and Memphis. And so they might be like, hey, like Lauri Markkanen, you're healthy now. Let's go play basketball in Boston. That's the game for you.
Yeah, the silly season for the Utah Jazz. I mean, at least they admitted this, around the All-Star break. They're like, we're just not going to play the old dudes when, especially against lower competition. It's like, hey, this is our perfect opportunity to see what our younger players can do. Cody Williams, Johnny Juzang, etc. So, Kyle Filipowski was definitely the first name that came to mind just based off the schedule and all the resting that's going on in Utah. I would also throw out there Ty Jerome. The Cleveland Cavaliers play the Heat, the Charlotte Hornets. Charlotte Hornets, you can pretty much write off one of Darius Garland or Donovan Mitchell that game. So Ty Jerome will definitely cook. Also, I think you can look at the Thunder too. They also have a really good schedule playing against Memphis, Portland, and Denver. Cason Wallace, Aaron Wiggins is a guy that's been kind of having standalone value as like a threes and points guy. Also getting some sneaky rebounds in there. So I think you could add him in a deeper league. And I'm trying to think of who else here. The Wizards don't have a great schedule. I mean, they do play. Actually, I take that back. They play the Jazz tonight, and then they play Toronto on Saturday. So fantasy friendly, as fantasy friendly teams as you can get. But Keyshawn George is a guy that I think is going to emerge around silly season. I don't think they're going to play Chris Middleton that much down the stretch. And frankly, Marcus Smart, all their veterans, Brogdon's already been ruled out. So if you're looking for a team that has a good schedule, playoff schedule, and also has some opportunity for their younger players, look no further than Washington. They're pretty much in the same situation as Utah, just doing whatever they can to put out the worst product that they can to lose some games. So that's good for fantasy value typically. To close out, let's see. Well, let me see what else. Is there any other guys or teams that you guys are targeting? Even looking ahead to the fantasy playoffs, are there any teams that you're kind of eyeing or focusing on heading into next week?
I think Brooklyn plays the 5-game week next week, and that's definitely a team to look at. And then over the next 3 weeks, there's a few teams that play 12 games, which is the Nets, Pacers, Lakers, Sixers, Spurs, and Wizards. And I think maybe not as much the Pacers and Lakers, but the other 4 teams will have at least a few guys that you can look at as streaming targets.
Yeah, the Wizards for sure. Like whether you're starting your playoffs next week or the week after, they have 12 games. They have 4-4-4 for both of them. So that's certainly a team to target. San Antonio as well. I think they've got a pretty good schedule here. Let's see. Yeah, they're in a similar boat where you get 12 games each of those, following 2 playoff formats here. So I think those are 2 teams to certainly target in terms of fantasy value at this point. And they should both have some low rostered players available to benefit from too. Yeah.
Thanks for mentioning the Pacers. Was going to say Aaron Nesmith and Andrew Nembhard are 2 guys that I wouldn't expect to be as valuable, at this stage. But once it comes to playoff time, you get that 4-4-4. That's certainly going to give you a little production boost in volume. Speaking of volume and where you need to tune in to get the best information across NBC, look no further than watch the biggest names in sports talk, including Mike Florio, Dan Patrick, Dan Lebitard, and Matthew Berry, as they cover the biggest moments on and off the field each weekday on the NBC Sports Now channel. It is now available on Peacock and free on most streaming platforms. Learn more at NBCSports.com/now. Funny that we bring up the Indiana Pacers because Tyrese Haliburton has been the best player across 9-cat leagues over the last couple of weeks. Dude's had, I think over the last 6 games, if I'm reading it correctly, 75 assists to only 7 turnovers. That's a ridiculous assist to turnover ratio. And then averaging 24 points over that span, shooting 61% from the field, 59 from 3, and he hasn't missed a free throw. Man, he must be playing most of his games at home because that is ridiculous production there. Now that we're talking about, how to prepare for the fantasy playoffs, one of my guys, I think it's going to cost a lot to get Tyrese Haliburton. I don't know how you make that trade work. But I think a player that you can get at a cheaper cost is Pascal Siakam, whose numbers haven't been off the charts. But given the playoff schedule, I think that's a guy that you could probably trade comparable value, give a rounder or two to actually get in fantasy. But, yeah, I just want to get your thoughts, Noah, on what Tyrese Haliburton has shown us over the last couple of weeks, crucial for fantasy playoffs, but then also – would you, if you had to trade for Tyrese Haliburton, what would you be willing to offer? And how kind of just your thoughts on how he's progressed throughout this tough season?
I think it's pretty interesting because it was obviously a very slow start for him. And I feel like the narrative has basically been bad pick, bust. If you drafted him, you're probably not in the playoffs in your league. Raph and I were part of a mid-season mock draft that took place during the All-Star break. And my guy Chad Simpson took Haliburton at 6. And there was so many tweets saying like, wow, what a bad pick. What a waste of a pick. But it's like over the course of the season, do you know where he is in Basketball Monsters 9-cat rankings, which I know don't necessarily mean everything. He's 6th. Yeah. It's exactly right. Like that's where he is. So it's like that in my mind, I'm like, okay, like I get it. He started slow, but like he's been so good since then. And then since that mock, like you said, Haliburton's been the best player in 9-cat value in fantasy basketball. So that's cool to see because he was obviously a frustrating start to the year, but he's figured things out. When we were doing the Q&A, when Raph and I were doing the Q&A yesterday, somebody asked if we should, or like if they would trade, if trading Anthony Edwards for Tyrese Haliburton would make sense. Like if that would be a good trade. Brought up Minnesota's schedule next 3 weeks. They have a 3-3-3. Indiana has 4-4-4. It's like, Haliburton's been playing incredibly well and you're getting 3 extra games. Like, I'd much rather have Haliburton than Anthony Edwards as of right now. And I think that there are a number of guys that are in similar tiers to Haliburton that I would just rather have based off, or that I'd rather have Haliburton just based off the schedule, but also just how well he's been playing. So I don't know if he'll continue to shoot 60% from the floor and have probably like a 10-to-1 assist turnover ratio, but he's going to continue to be one of the best players in fantasy basketball.
I think for me, it may be a matter of him being healthy. And he came into the season still dealing with those leg injuries that first brought up during the conference finals. He didn't play much, if at all. I think he played like 1 game in the Olympics, if anything. So I think being healthy, getting that time off during the All-Star break, I think that's given him a boost. And it couldn't come at a better time for fantasy managers if you have him rostered. Like you said, Dan, it's going to take a lot to get him off of someone in a trade, this close to the playoffs, especially the production and the schedule. If I have him, I'm not trading him for anyone outside of, say, like the top 3 or 5 players. And you're not going to be able to get like a Jokic or an SGA for Tyrese Haliburton. So, I think you just hold on and hope he can lead your team to a championship. As well as he's been playing, I think he can do it too.
Yeah, and I mean, the home away splits is still a thing a little bit, but like if you look at over the next 12 games, 8 of those games are at home. So if I have Tyrese Haliburton, I am not trading him right now. Just been playing outstanding basketball as of late, so you love to see it for someone that is as high of a draft pick as he was. How do we feel about Devin Vassell, Raph?
Vindicated. That's how I feel.
37 points, 11 rebounds, 5 assists, 8 threes, 5 stocks. damn, that man had a coming out party a little late in the season, but clearly you feel vindicated. So is this someone that you're trusting the rest of the way?
I am. Look, he didn't have a great season. There are some talks about should you move on from Devin Vassell, and I didn't think that was the case. He was still starting. It didn't feel like he was a threat to get benched, especially at this point in the season. No Wembanyama, you might as well leave him out there. See what you have in him. See how he meshes with De'Aaron Fox as well, because that's going to be a key, factor for their future. Last night, he flipped a switch. I thought he had a couple good games before that too. So, yeah, in terms of trade value, I think that's an interesting question because you could certainly justify selling high on Vassell. So I don't think he's going to do 37-11 like he did last night again. But I don't know, maybe you ride this thing out. I'm trying to figure out where you'd probably target someone to try to get back in return. Like top 75 is someone in that 75 to 90 range, if anything. And even at that point, I think his upside is such that I don't know if I would make that trade personally.
Yeah, I think any sort of buy low window is probably closed at this point.
Yeah.
After a performance like that, you're just probably be able to make it happen unless someone just that has had him rostered and is very frustrated by the way the season has gone, just wants to be okay, cool, let me sell high. And then it's to the point where you're still able to buy low. I know Raph and I were both asked quite a few times during Q&As over the last few weeks about what to do with Devin Vassell. And neither of us was ready to drop him. I think on this show sometime within the last couple of weeks, I suggested that San Antonio could bench him for Stephon Castle, who's playing really well in the sense that maybe having him come off the bench, play as more of the primary scoring option could be something to get his confidence going. But they didn't do it. And it's good to see him figure things out while staying part of the starting lineup. Hopefully, this is just going to kickstart a nice finish to the season for him because he is a very talented player that I'm still very high on long term, but it's been a disappointing year. So if he could end on a high note, it would be a good sign for San Antonio's young core and their future development, being able to say, okay, Vassell is still who we thought he was. Wemby will be back. De'Aaron Fox is still here. Stephon Castle looks like a star, and we're going to add multiple first-round picks. So it's a good thing just in general. As far as trade value, it's probably hard to say right now. I'd be trying to still buy low, even if it doesn't seem like it's a likely option. But every league's going to be different, so maybe somebody just wants to get rid of him.
Yeah, I wonder if that buy window is closed because he's been so erratic. He's put together 3 good games in a row. But looking at San Antonio's playoff schedule, that 4-4-4, man, that's a player that I'm this is the type of guy that you'd want to get at this stage in the season. He's finally turning it on. Maybe you pay a little bit of a premium to get somebody like that on your team. Mm-hmm. I'm still trying to find out what that comp is, though. Is it a Josh Giddey who's playing ridiculously, even though he missed his last game? He's been a top 10 player over the last several weeks. Is it Nikola Vucevic who hasn't played, but he's on his way back? Sell high. He gets benched down the stretch. You get more value out of Vassell. It's so hard to tell where that value kind of sits with Vassell. I don't know if you guys have any other ideas, but how would you go second, third round value of a player that doesn't have a good fantasy playoff schedule? Or is it just hey, let me just shoot my shot and get rid of my injured guy that may be returning, but he's been a top, player over the last several weeks or month or so? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I think I'd probably try the latter, especially if you have someone who's at risk of being, sat down and have their minutes tapered down the stretch. That's probably what I would try to do. Say, I don't know how much money people are paying to participate in these leagues, but sometimes you just got to throw that Hail Mary out there sometimes,
Yeah, definitely more of a case-by-case thing to me. I think it would very much depend on who the specific player was as far as how much I'd rather have the extra games. As
couple games,
just
right.
Right. It's when it was the Haliburton versus Anthony Edwards example, that one was probably a little bit more straightforward. But if there was somebody that wasn't quite as talented as Haliburton that had the extra 3 games there, I think that's like, can they make up that difference in production in 3 games? It's very specific to case by case and like what categories you need, who the matchups are there back-to-backs? Like there's so many factors there.
A lot of factors going into trades, and I haven't even executed a trade this year. I got to get on it because the Yahoo Fantasy trade deadline ends tomorrow at 11:59 Pacific time, March 6th. So who are some silly season guys, not even silly season, like who are some players, Noah, that you've been actively trying to target, or maybe players you're trying to sell? Either side.
Let me see here. I think a lot of it is guys we've already mentioned or guys that we've mentioned a couple times over the last few weeks. I haven't made too many trades. I'm trying to think how many trades we've made in redraft leagues. Most of the trades I've made are in dynasty formats, but just looking at my industry pickup lineup, I mean, I still like Max Christie and Gershon Yabusele are 2 guys that I have there. Donovan Clingan. I'm not sure the exact rostership percentage on those guys, but all guys are going to play a lot down the stretch. And then we've talked about specific teams where it's like they have 5 guys, 6 guys that are young that are going to see a ton of minutes, and they're basically just dart throws at this point. Like, pick one. Which one do you kind of need categories that they can provide? Like Utah, Washington, Brooklyn. Those are probably the main ones to me. So it's a lot of dart throws during silly season to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think you can even target guys on like good teams. You know, they may benefit from a starter sitting. I mentioned Ty Jerome earlier in the show. He's someone to certainly consider. You know, Peyton Pritchard's been a bit inconsistent recently, and he's already rostered in a good percentage of leagues, but that's someone else to kind of think of, especially with the Drew Holiday situation where we don't know how many games he's going to have to miss. I know he's not going to undergo surgery on that finger, but if he has to miss multiple games, you know, going into fantasy playoff weeks, Peyton Pritchard probably have added value, even though he's going to continue to come off the bench. So I think in addition to teams that are either tanking or just flat out bad, you're going to want to look at some of those good teams that are probably pretty much secure in where they're going to be seeding wise, and they can start to kind of lower the minutes of some of their main players in anticipation of the actual playoffs.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out, I wrote a trade column a couple of days ago, and most of the players it seemed like I was targeting were on that, like, they're not in the play-in tournament, but they're like on the fringe of like, hey, if we win a couple of more games, we can be in the playoffs, like secure-wise. So like the Sacramento Kings, I feel like is a good team to target where they have their pot committed with so many all-stars. I mean, you trade for Zach LaVine, you're going to be playing them down this stretch. So like, I think you could have, if you don't want to go for, you know, these marquee players like Tyrese Haliburton, I think you can definitely get these mid-round guys that don't generate as much value on the normal case-by-case basis. So I had LaVine flag, DeMar DeRozan. Christian Brown is a guy that I think is very underrated in fantasy that probably can't cost that much. I mean, he's playing great, but just the lack of name notoriety, I feel like you could probably get off of a player that's not playing very well. It's like, oh, Christian Brown, like, yeah, sure, I'll trade this guy for him. And then obviously, I think from a selling standpoint, I think most of the people we talked about already, the Utah Jazz marquee players, makes sense to get rid of them off your team just because we don't know who we can trust. LaMelo Ball, I think, obviously is a big trade target just because we don't know what Charlotte's going to do down the stretch. And then even the Suns, I mean, Bradley Beal's been playing well, but, you know, obviously I don't know if you can trust that, even though the Suns seem like they're going to go for it at the end of the season, just to try to give one more shot to make this thing work. But I'm trying to see what other people I had on this list.
Last week when I had Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan as trade targets for every player, it was an issue. But now all of a sudden, those are your 2 guys right here that you want to say as
but they're the throw-in piece. That's why it makes sense. It's
exactly.
like, yeah, people are willing to get off of DeMar DeRozan. Yeah, exactly. Just put them attached to any of your trades. It's going to go down. I got some slander for saying Zion Williamson's a trade candidate, but I mean, I don't know if you want to trust Zion playing the final 3 weeks of the season. Good luck to you. I feel like the Pelicans right now realize that, hey, Zion looks healthy, looks pretty good. It's probably the best case scenario for them that like he's going to go into the season, the final end of the season healthy. Now they can decide what they want to do from a franchise standpoint. You know, do you potentially look at him on the trade market or do you decide to invest in him, which would be a ballsy move? based on what we've seen in his lack of availability. But yeah, guys, any other thoughts as we approach week 19 in fantasy basketball here, pretty much at the home stretch? Any parting words, final thoughts? I'll take that as
yeah. I actually have a reminder: daylight saving time, early Sunday morning. So make sure you keep track of that for the sake of your lineups, because it's a bad feeling when you wake up, realize games are started on that Sunday, and you forgot to set your lineup because you forgot about the time change. So yeah.
Is this someone speaking from experience, or is this?
Yeah, it has happened to me before. A long night out, in my younger days, a long night out. Then, hey, they're playing basketball.
See how you had to preface that?
Set my
like,
lineup.
Oh, wait, the younger days. I don't do that no more.
Yeah, I'm not outside like that anymore.
That good life lessons from Raph there, because I completely forgot about daylight savings, to be honest. My parting words. Also trade for OG Anunoby. I think the New York Knicks are one of those 12 teams playing the 4x4, 4-4-4, and with Karl-Anthony Towns out, OG Anunoby is looking like the second best player on the Knicks right now. So I would try to go get him if you can. I think he's probably pretty affordable. Noah, what you got other than your support of the Sixers that I appreciate?
I stand with Dan. Just need to put that back out there. But I think your Zion point is something that we'll end up talking about a good bit over the next couple weeks, and then a lot this summer, because if he is healthy and playing as well as he is right now. I think he was a plus 13 and a 21-point loss last night. Like, plus minus, as we've discussed on this show, it doesn't tell the whole story, but that one I feel like tells a little bit of a story. So does it make sense for them to trade him when he's playing this well and is finally healthy like this summer? So we'll see. I'm sure the rumors will be swirling. I think on top of that, Luka getting traded just basically opens the door for basically
anything.
All but like 5 NBA players at this point to be traded. So there'll be a lot of rumors this summer. It'll be fun.
It is going to be fun. Thank you for tuning in to the Rotoworld Basketball Show. We'll see you next week. Fantasy playoffs get underway. It's time to get crazy. Crunch time, baby. Let's go.